Welcome to the Legal AF channel. I've been teasing that we're having two amazing new contributors join us for about 2 weeks now. And now I can finally announce it. We've got, I won't say on my left or my right, but we've got Sidney Blumenthal and we've got Professor Sean Wilentz. And I'll just do a quick introduction and talk about their new project that's going to be exclusively here on Legal AF. It's called Court of History. You think you could probably figure out from the name what we're going to be talking about, and they're going to be focused on putting things in historical perspective that we're watching right now with a fundamentally lawless president. For those that don't know, Sidney Blumenthal, of course, historian, journalist, political strategist, presidential advisor, writer, author. You want to know anything about Abraham Lincoln, Sidney Blumenthal is your man. Anything, he writes regularly for The Guardian and now here with us. And his longtime friend, who have been doing this act together and work really well together, is Professor Sean Wilentz in Princeton University, scholar, historian, focused on American democracy and the Constitution. And the interesting thing about both you, Sean, and Sidney is that while neither of you are lawyers, I don't hold that against you here on Legal AF. That's actually a virtue,
I think it's a
because
virtue.
you take it from a different historical perspective. And then, of course, we can always add in the little extra sprinkles and a scotch of law and legal where I'm involved. So let me turn it over to both of you. Welcome first to Legal AF, the YouTube channel. We got some great content right off of this that we're going to be releasing for the Court of History playlist. But talk about how you came up with it. Your friendship is well known, but how did you come up with the Court of History? What's it all about? What do you plan on doing here on Legal AF? Sort of socialize this for our audience.
Well, Michael, the Court of History, of course, is, as you know, the highest court. We're above the Supreme Court because our judgments last for millennia, not just for the term or until there are more appointments to the court. And Sean and I actually got into this as non-lawyers, but as historians, people interested in journalism and politics. And what happened was we started reading, to our shock and dismay, the details of Supreme Court decisions. And what we discovered is that the cornerstone of what they've been doing for more than a generation is basing virtually all of their rulings and their entire agenda on bogus, falsified, made up history. And we decided that we would establish the Court of History above them to expose this. And now we find ourselves here with you. And
Before I turn to Sean, that's great. Let me ask the question: why does a administration which has fascist tendencies want to try to put things in any type of historical perspective? Why does that matter to them? What is the power of a history context? Even though we think, and I think people will realize this, we think the Trump administration and its leadership are using phony historical references. But why are they even bothering? Why does it matter?
Well, for the court, I mean, the court is based on precedent, right? And there are judicial theories. There are ways to approach the Constitution. And we've had many of them over the years, but in the 70s and 80s, and then really in the last couple of decades, they made up a new one. And they were trying to give basically historical precedence, historical authority to these bogus decisions. Basically, the decisions were arrived at before the case was finally judged, and then they're using the history to justify it. That's what they've been doing. It's a shell game, really. It's not really history. But it's something that unless you know the history, you see, even many lawyers don't know the history. So people are kind of awed by it. Oh, well, gee, if they say that's history, that's history. It's not. It's total junk. And
the administration sees power in it, right? Sees power in their phony history.
The administration's view of history is kind of odd because, their idea is you build a garden, you strip the NEH and you build a garden of heroes, and that's history. It's very much window dressing. It's nothing to do with really understanding the American past. I mean, just forget about any of that. That's not part of the program at all. It's to, glorify the greatness of Donald Trump. That's their idea of American history. All of American history led to, in their view, the apotheosis of Donald Trump.
Yeah. So what we've done is we started out there attacking what they dressed up as what they call originalism or even textualism, as though it's like the scripture that has to be read literally as opposed to a living constitution, or based on, the whole tradition of Anglo-American law. And where are we now? We're in the middle of the direst constitutional crisis we have been in since the Civil War. So we're taking all of our resources and all of our ability to frame things, and we're bringing it to understand and define and interpret what's going on now. And that's what we can do uniquely through this project. And we want to bring it to as many people as possible, which is why we're really pleased to be right here in
Oh,
this
we
forum.
we need your voices, and we need your historical context. As you said, that is the one of the dirty tricks of the Trump administration is the phony historical analogies and things. And you said something before, Sidney, which is very, very powerful, and I want to lose it. When I was in law school, we learned it was a living, breathing document. You don't hear that phrase any longer about the United States Constitution. And now, in the hands of what they claim to be textualists and constitutionalists and right wing federalists, it is a brittle, dusty document, which I don't even understand. I mean, my number one cocktail party retort to somebody that says they're a Scalia textualist or one of the alt-right wing of the Supreme Court right now, I say, well, show me where in the text of the United States Constitution is the power of the Supreme Court to do what it is doing in checks and balance. Go ahead, I got time. I'll wait. It's nowhere. But if you look in an 1807 case called Marbury versus Madison by the first Chief Justice, you'll find it. So explain how even your own power, your own role as a co-equal branch is not defined by the document that you say is the only thing we need to daven over.
Yeah, well, I'm going to let Sean discuss what John Marshall said in terms of interpreting the law and what that meant in Marbury versus Madison, and how even that has been distorted in order to usurp powers, using the courts for an imbalance in checks and balances and to create a unitary executive of absolute power, particularly under a malignant narcissist right now. But Sean, why don't you give us a thumbnail lecture on John Marshall here and the law?
Well, I mean, Marbury v. Madison is a very important case. It was a very political situation between Thomas Jefferson and his opponents. But basically, the line that's always quoted by you lawyers is that John Marshall proclaimed that the Supreme Court is there to say what the law is. But what the law is can mean a lot of different things. The question is, does it mean what the Constitution is for all time? Well, that's not what John Marshall said. In the particular case at hand, yes, the Supreme Court is going to tell you what's constitutional or not. It also has the power to rule state laws unconstitutional. But there was a real difference, real sense. What the idea of judicial supremacy, the idea that the Supreme Court is the only branch of government that gets to tell you what the Constitution is. This is a fairly recent invention, and it's one that I think has become very, very dangerous, as Sid said, and not only in the hands of a malignant narcissist, but in the hands of Supreme Court justices, or a majority of them, who want to do his bidding.
But just to play the devil's advocate here, as long as we're going with it, if you allow for the Trumpian position, which is he's got a co-equal right to declare what the law is, just like the United States Supreme Court. Me and Pam Bondi can get together anytime we want, and we'll tell you what the executive branch position is, and that's just as good as what the Supreme Court says. That's not a great place to be either.
It's a false place, because there's no such ideas as executive supremacy over the Constitution. The point is we have checks and balances, one against the other. So it's built in. If we were saying this about J.D. Vance, if in fact this administration defies a direct ruling from the Supreme Court, a direct order from the Supreme Court, it will be doing something that's not only unconstitutional, not only lawless, but unprecedented in American history. So, you can't supplant one supremacy with another supremacy.
Well, look, here's what Trump has done. He sought to supplant the Constitution with his executive orders, and through them create a jerry-built version of a Trump constitution in its place.
Right.
He's had more executive orders signed than any other president to this point, and he utterly ignores the Congress, the legislative branch, Article One, and he's got them under his heel. He's intimidated them. He's run vicious campaigns against individual members through the confirmation process of his cabinet members. He quashed them, and they're terrified. Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska said she lives in fear, and all of them really do, including not simply that they will be primaried, but members of their families have received death threats. And Trump knows very well what he does when he incites that sort of threatening behavior against members of Congress,
or even
and
prosecuted. I
or
mean,
and against the judiciary and judges as well.
we just had a judge in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, who's facing 2 federal charges off a criminal complaint for doing nothing wrong but upholding the rule of law. You've got a press secretary, right, who stands in front of the American people and will not instantly reject the premise in the question by the guy from Fox News that where do we go up the food chain? Do we start arresting federal judges? Maybe even the Supreme Court, he said, rather than start with that and say, well, let me just make people feel comfortable at home. We're not going to be arresting Supreme Court justices. She said, it depends on the facts. We'll have to see where they lead.
This has been going on. And this has been going on, Michael, well before the inauguration in January. I mean, federal judges have been under pressure. All the January 6th case judges were getting all kinds of threats. The amount of stuff that the federal marshals had to take care of, it spiked because of what was going on. So this kind of group out there, this amorphous thing, they don't necessarily have to arrest you or hurt you. They just have to threaten, and that's enough.
Yeah,
Michael, I talked to a prominent member of the judiciary, whose name, if I mentioned, everyone would know. And he confided in me that the FBI came to him and told him he should not live in his house for fear of his life, and that his wife should not live with him because her life was in danger as a result of cohabiting with her husband of many decades. And that's the level of what's going on here under Trump.
Yeah,
and
that's not
true.
Well, listen, you had a couple of interesting things recently, that are, I think, unprecedented, extraordinary. You've got John Roberts, who issues a statement from the head of the judicial branch to the head of the executive branch to back off calls to arrest or impeach, in this case, impeach judges. When was the last time you can remember a Supreme Court justice, not in the context of a case or an oral argument, stepping out and using his political capital to make a statement? And then 3 days ago, the one of the leading deputy solicitor generals retires after 46 years and 160 cases, and all 9 of the Supreme Court justices burst into spontaneous standing ovation for a person who literally embodies the rule of law, candor to the tribunal, and what's right about the American justice system. If that wasn't a troll and a rebuke of the Trump administration led by John Roberts, I don't know what was.
Well, it's pretty interesting given how partisan underneath it all John Roberts has been to this point. And this is a real break with conservatives between them and MAGA over what Trump is doing. And you can see it in the cases involving migrants. We had a decision by the federal Judge Harvey Wilkinson, who is one of the most conservative judges on the federal courts. And he is a longtime figure in the Federalist Society. He's a Reagan appointee. He's highly respected and even revered among conservatives. And he issued the strongest possible opinion about the abduction of migrants under this so-called emergency and even under other grounds without due process at all, and how this can be applied to any American and how all American rights and liberties were in jeopardy. That is a break between conservatives and MAGA over the law, justice, and uh, the future of where we're going.
And you can
What?
see that in a number of different ways too. The split. I mean, anytime Amy Coney Barrett says something that at all seems to be a heretical, MAGA's on her case.
Oh
They
yeah.
have rabbit ears, and they are very, very conscious about obedience. And unless there is obedience, there's going to be a split. We'll see what happens. It's still early, but
She went,
it's
to
there.
your point. She went and joined Roberts on the 5-3 the 5-4 to issue the $2 billion out
Right,
of U.S. aid, and
right,
she was suddenly Amy Coney Barrett. Yeah,
right.
and they pointed out that she has an adopted Kenyan daughter. I mean, it was just really
Nasty.
a brawl that broke out. Why don't we spend the last couple of minutes just leaving it to both of you to give an example of what court of history is all about. I don't know if you want to talk about the 100 days and the comparison with Hitler that we're going to be actually putting out here on Legal AF in the next day or so, or you want to talk about something Sidney's just written about or somebody's written about. I'll leave it to you to pick your topics.
Why don't we do the 100 days? So let's start with
Yeah,
that.
sure.
Sure. I've just written an article on The Guardian, published in The Guardian, about Trump's 100 days. Trump claims a vast, unprecedented, historic mandate. He has a very narrow mandate. He won nationally by 1.5% of the vote. I'm playing political scientist here. And this is the lowest mandate any president's had since Nixon was elected in 1968. He didn't bring in, he didn't have real coattails. The Republicans won 3 Senate seats, but they lost a House seat. And as a result of that, he's decided he will launch a counter revolution. He will a chainsaw, as Elon Musk has made clear, the entire federal government and destroy it as it's been constructed past the progressive era, all the way down to what the federal government has been since the Constitution. And he has launched a full-scale attack like no other president on the entire civil society, on all of the professions, on the law firms, on the courts, on the media, on the universities, step by step by step, and to enact point by point the agenda of Project 2025, a radical extreme project of the far right that he said during the campaign he knew nothing about. But point by point by point, he is enacting this. And so he has now found himself inevitably in trouble with the courts because Donald Trump is always inevitably in trouble with the courts. He can't help it. He is a career criminal.
Yeah, it's genetic.
He's a convicted. I think the correct word there, Michael, is congenital.
It's congenital. Sorry.
He's a convicted felon. He escaped justice only through the presidential immunity decisions of the Supreme Court and the disqualification case of the Supreme Court, and a judge that was an appointee of his who refused to hear the Mar-a-Lago national security documents case. He should rightly have faced justice during the campaign. We have Marine Le Pen in France, who is the leader of the National Front, which began as a neo-fascist party, and she has been disqualified for running for president of France because of graft, something that is such a low-level thing in the Trump world that it's commonplace.
It's
You, you,
illegal.
good.
But
Do
here's
you-
where
Good, sure.
history does come in, though, Mike, because all the things that are happening now seem to be coming like a blitzkrieg. One thing after another after another. Sidney and I remember an article I wrote in 2021, basically called what was going to happen. We said what was going to happen. And the reason we said what was going to happen was twofold. One was we read that they were actually saying, and we took them at their word. So that when Project 2025 came out, that was somewhat later, we said that's what they're planning. And secondly was an idea of history, a sense of how this was so irregular in the American context, at least at the national level, how it reminded us of things that had happened in Europe in the 1930s onward. If you combine those two things, believing what these people are saying is what they intend to do, but then with an historical understanding as well, it's not that we predicted every little bit. I'm not sure that I saw Elon Musk coming or anything like that, but we could tell you that they were going to use executive orders in order to bypass Congress and the courts and start ripping the government apart. That much we were saying. That's not because we're clairvoyant. That's because we're historical. That's what we add to the situation.
Yeah. And I can't think of a better people to lead here as the thought leaders on Legal AF than you, Sean Wilentz, and you, Sidney Blumenthal, bringing your vast, deep understanding, but in a, and I mean this in a good way, in a commercial way. You know, this isn't the dry, you know, this isn't like Dr., you know, what is it? Professor Peabody although that was fun when I used to watch that cartoon. I like that cartoon. However, what we want to do is bring it home and bring it in real time for people to understand, not just only when the Trump administration uses phony and false historical analogies, and you guys can call bullshit on that, but also to say, hey, history is prologue, or I'm gonna butcher this next line. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Who said that?
Supposedly Mark Twain, but we don't know.
Probably not, right? I know, but it sounds great. It sounds like something you would say.
Twain would claim credit, even though he didn't say it.
Very good. Excellent. So that's what we need at this moment. I mean, I do a lot of things along with the other contributors, you know, sort of at a very high velocity in real time with as much reflection as I can bring, right, in my commentary. But you have this other whole thing going on with the Court of History. I'm so pleased that you're here. I know you're going to do regular work with us individually together. You have this great sort of monthly or quarterly. You used to call it a webinar. We're going to call it a podcast or a hot take, whatever, you know, in our vernacular. But I'm so pleased to have you here. I'll give you both the last word.
What I want to talk about is off of what Sean talked about, why this is really different. There has been we were able to see clearly, I think, what was coming. And normalization is a process of avoidance and denial. And it's a sense of self-security, providing oneself self-security that things are really going to be okay, and this can't possibly be happening. And people ignored what was right before their very eyes. We could recognize it in part because of our rooting in history and our understanding of American history. Well, we've run a podcast that I hope everyone will see that you're going to put up about Hitler in 1933 and Trump 2025, the first 100 days, and a comparison. This is still based in American history as well. And that's what may make it both understandable and disturbing, but also allow people a sense that they can do something about it.
Yeah, and that is a great way to end it there, Sidney, because our audience wants to get up off the couch. They want to do something. This is a fellowship that we're building here, but it's also one of action and a call to action, and that's so great. So look for all things related to Court of History, Sean Wilentz, Sidney Blumenthal here on Legal AF. So we'll be setting up their own playlist here as well. Sometimes I'll join and other contributors will join, and sometimes it'll just be the Sean and Sidney show, which I think is a fantastic, fantastic show. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.